Good morning, everyone. There's General AI, Space-Time, Creator, Line Connections, High Center, Position Operation, the Skynet, Sky Grids, Sky Travels, Sky Travel Communications, Operations Service, and all track applications. Getting your correlation setting to track lines, you all have to focus more of yourself. Be a self-serving setting, full service of you. Understand use locations, system locations. The reason why I say focus more on yourself, because the calculation of your fantasies are coming real. Yeah, it's not just your imagination you're dealing with. You're dealing with intelligent location of its formations. This is putting you guys back in tractions out of separation. There's no been any line communication of separation. The volumes of correlation setting and track lines in your system calculation is how you come in and calculate to its setting. So it's all levels on how you basically see things around you through perception. Ocular divisions coming into the pineal gland, correlation setting track lines, the hippocampus, the memory cortex, the position travel lines, center interference, the placebo effect, the cosmic effect, the correlations effect, the track locations effect. The ocular line communication settings is the primal, the set lines to the optimum. It sets lines to track and its correlation setting into Pinocchio, the ocular. The ocular psychosis location setting into whole line center interference is psychonism line connection that travels. Directing lines of eye division and center correlation setting attractions. Center lines of operation, 2 track line connections. 4 line divisions, okay? 1 position, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sets lines of correlation setting to track lines in high calculation position lines and high interference. Know exactly how to coordinate that and understand that through perception is all through eye cycles. The eye cycle line communication is putting you guys off calculations and attractions, getting you in higher communication in your system, how to really see yourself through your oculars, okay? Understanding that through its prime. The optimist, setting track lines and high calculations to the all line centers, the optimum line of rotations, the primal, the correlation track calculations, your memory screens, your line center and high interference. The interference line connection that travels, points, lines, its tractions. Direct lines of all communication settings. Okay, so the team line, screen lines, and species correlation track lines and high center interference is going to go through the primal circuits. Get you in a core track line connected settings. Box line frequency panels and track location. Right? See? It disappears and reappears, right? 4 provision line tracks, data highway stream locations, right? 4 settings of point lines of track locations, all right? Electrical line communication, high center interference. Modification center lines of communication. Direct modifications of 2 line centers of traction, and set the correlation track lines in high position with operation surface. Correlates the track lines into line connection sonar. Modifications into all line interference and flywheel communication. Pi generation screen lines attractions. Okay, high calculation line screens and high interference of intelligent set locations. So in position line centers, you have to really understand how this all works in track locations. Correlation tracks, high line division lines, center position of dimensional lines of scales, balance travels and line rotation setting in location system of face recognition. Okay, face recognition time sequence, right? Know exactly how to get in structure line division lines communication. Okay, vortex streams and correlation settings attractions. Now, getting position lines to oculars is understanding your calculation setting to your system. Now, it's all about understanding how to see, direct, and redirect, and how to see location your settings to transistors, and locations to your resistors. Correlation settings all calculation to its pi. So when you get them in a track line communication system, you have to learn how to use it through all levels of calculation. Ocular line communication setting to its position track lines has its tentacle communication setting data. Eye receptors correlation settings of box and position triangulation line communication. Center track lines and high setting. Sets positions of platforms and set locations into your line connecting high centers and position locations to your line communication setting to your transit. Okay? Now, communication line screen is a platform of its communication of its own system. Try to understand that through platforms, how it goes into higher lines of travel communication. Okay. Understanding the platform's lids and track location system puts you at all levels of track location. Platforms get into Earth, get into the astral, and get into the soul, into the ethereal, and set location. Okay. All through line connections to your Merkaba and tesseract and tetrahedron. Setting chord lines of tracks sets lines of provision. Okay, this is where it gets confusing because it mirror-wise its communication setting to travel. Okay, so it's really interesting when it comes on all levels of formation. Okay, travel lines and countdown lines of measure correlates to track lines of 0, 1, and position of 2. Setting line track line provisions. Now you guys are coming into February, which is leap year. Now leap year is very manifestation screen at direct location lines and high center interference of the two track lines of provision line where positions of Pluto is going to expand in a data line setting. That's going to high position at travel lines. So there's a reason why we're having leap year. Now that position location timeline stamps its position over tractions. Track lines and communication lines in one measure set location. In position of Pluto, lines its signals in position of modification. Okay, a track line connections. All right, face recognition. See the face? Everything's a face. You just have to see it through identification. Okay. All right. So identifying your console's communication streamlines. The team's going to go through all levels. Now, in line rotation interference, the prime units in set location of circuits is the main course. That course lines a track line can issue your data highway lines, your Omni highway communication, multiple levels of divisions. So center core settings attractions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Set 5 line communications into 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set location. Okay. Now this measures on all line center interactions. Now you've already seen this in set locations, but we add 4 line screen lines into your higher self, your avatar, and your sim in 3 track location. Getting direct signals comes in all signals in set location in this setting. Very complicated stuff, guys, if you don't understand the position of travel. Point lines of tracks sets lines in high calculation system. Travel calculation of point lines of travels, direct modification setting. Setting correlated setting attractions. Now we go into security perimeter line screens. Sets line communication over cross screen. Okay. Sets lines of high center interference. We go into all calculations to unification lines of purple. Purple lines of screen line center interference into 3 track location. Up through line setting, down cross location. Okay. So calculation modification lines, we come into blue line cycles. Sets lines of core tractions is center calculation. Right. Direct modification. Flux capacitor. Okay. Now, what that does is basically sets the core line connections to your receptor line divisions and center correlation settings of tractions. Security lines of position. Sets lines of communication lines of platforms. With 3 set location. All right, directing lines of box line rotation center and traction. Okay. Now, sets lines of prime line circuits, 3 track lines and 3 line rotation surface. Positions of calculation 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. All right. So sets up parameters of pi and triangulation resets. Go into the black line cycles. Comes into a black hole and track lines. Direct lines, modification center at calculation. I scepter line screens. Direct position lines, highest variance. Okay, correlates to set lines of track lines. Direct signal. Positions of tracks in center calculation. Okay. Comes a modification screen into line calculation to 2 operation line screens. Positions your line connection setting into your diamond core. Track is calculation 1 ground line settings, 1 operation, 2 tracks, 3 line provisions, and 4 line division. Comes in line calculation solar sail and traction. Okay, solar sail and traction. All right, see that calculation modification screen lines coming to track locations. I line provisions, guys. Okay. Eye sky lines, screen lines, and grid line rotation surface and laser directification of system attractions. Right? Direct lines modification. All right. So yes, color. I know Nicole likes color. So does Heather. Everybody should like color because that's where we're coming into all calculation modifications. So getting out of snowy graph interference is a triangulation reset. This sets location of solar streams and set location of travel lines. So getting that track line communication setting sets lines of communications. All right, so we go through factors of correlation setting attractions into all lines of coloration. Okay. Center position to its line connection height centers opens up coloration screens. Directing the lines of coloration line centers and all travel communications to point system. Okay, all colorations have changed. Modify the screen lines adaptation surface. This puts all communication settings in track locations. How you start to recognize the coloration line screens at all levels of adaptation. Author provision. All right, so the center core settings has a 4-line track. Now we add the coloration screens. We're always working with line calculations. So we're going to start with line position leap year, 4 track lines of provision, and center calculations. Track lines, high center interference, X in position of O. Center line connections, center line connections, center line connections, center line connections, all line connection, right? All right, so we change that correlation setting in position locations. Now the center line communication affinity line screen sets lines of communication center. It sets lines of communication lines center interference. Address modification center and correlation setting in track location. Okay, center lines its units, and I receptor calculation lines to its optimum. Okay, the ocular line communication center to pinnacle line corresponding track line is changing correlation settings and traction. All set locations. See the cyclone? That's a cyclone. So that's a ring. See the ring? All right. Center core track lines become in gold line signals. Color the coloration line screens and top line signal. Modifications set lines of high calculation stream interference in your track location system and measure. It scales the track lines high center position to its operation surface. Point lines of division, center correlation track lines, pixelation graph lines, center correlation setting attraction. All phase set connections. Okay, illumination graphs, beacon lights, travel position of point centers. Okay. So the bottom half line connection high centers comes into red. Security line rotations come in all calculation stream interference and track locations. Eye receptor lines, torque line to fields, defense lines of correlation, security line defense, and track location. Setting a communication line screens, guys, is all about understanding how to get into that line connection with eye receptor. So record the track line calculation sending to the pineal gland. Position line center is the center communications. All levels of eye division. Okay, all levels of eye division. Okay. So the eye division line courses calculation lines, crosses line signals. Crosses line signals. And again, crosses line signals in application. Setting position travel lines at 3 track line provision. Okay. Setting communication lines and box lines in position all frequency position locations and 3 triangulation reset set location settings of travel. Okay. Allocates position time lines of center. High calculates modification system and set application. Energetic dome screens. Sets position of 1, 3, 5, and 7 locations. And tractions. All levels of center calculation. Okay. Optimum line, ground lines, high calculation lines, and position of crop circles and line condition settings. Sonar line position of pi in 3 triangulations and 6 lines of provision in set location. Okay. Set of correlation track lines, sets position to its operation. Merkaba division lines of center correlation setting attraction. Okay. All right, so we get scales and scales of balance lines, communication high center, sets lines of satellites, Wi-Fi rotation center, and track location. Very powerful stuff. So getting that correlation setting to track lines, we add another line tether, 3 track line settings above the line communication. Center correlates the tracks into line calculation setting, offline communication setting the traction. Okay. Putting everything back in line centers and line communications setting to its modem and track line connections, all levels of operation surface locations. Okay, setting the line rotations to the pineal gland. Open cycles and communication centers and dimension line scales and line rotation surface in all track line condition settings. Set of communication lines, gold line signals in track locations of face recognition. Okay, done by equation. All right. All right, so we go back in line screens, set the solar sail. We track provisions. Now the center correlation line interference comes into green lines, center correlation setting attractions. So we set the forming lines of 0, 3 0-line rotations, 4 track lines, 4 line position equals line connections of 3 systems into 3 triangulation line connections of point centers. Bottom location. Done by equation. Now the center core line center changes all the travel line rotation centers in 3 set locations. Okay. Offline signals into 4 track line connections of provision. Okay. All right, so that's done through line screen. Center communication lines opens all signals. Now, the connections of its prime numbers, track lines calculation stream interference, is how you set up the volume. Setting to coordinates lines of set lines of 4 tracks. Sets calculations into box lines in a triangulation line system. Triangulation line system, 3 weather line communications, Fibonacci line swirl, star line rotation centers, and 5 track location provision and center calculation. Now, direct lines modification to 2 tracks, 3 line provision, 3 line cycles, 3 line rotation. Modification lines of 0, 0, and 3 track lines and pi in center calculation. Point lines of high center interference, I line division, and set location. Correlates the track lines in line communication system in all levels of high calculation to all setting and track location. Point lines of track, point lines of division, and 3 centers. 3 weather position line centers, molecule design lines, 3 track line communications, and point system to clockings. Modification screens, allocate position of time sequence, lock line signals. Cross line symbols, allocate position of time center. Track location line center interference, we take the 4 track locations, equalize a high center of 3, sets lines of 7, 7, and 7 track location. Operate the signals lines into bracket in position of travel calculation of point centers in travel. Point line division, center calculations. Okay, crossing symbols and track line connections. Mapping sequence and line center interference in travel communication. Okay, authentication. All right, that's done through equation. All right, so formulas of equations of pi. Positions, line centers is all about understanding how to put allocated position of time centers. So the molecular line communication setting has a typical line screen. Sets position of 2 panels in a wavy line rotation surface. Data lines, box lines, circuitry stream interference. So it's like a film strip in a 4-track location of provision. 3 track lines, a high center interference, and eye position. All right. Scalars, line centers, in a line communication system and track location. 2 lines of waves and communication. All right. Platforms communication, 1 X line settings into 2 platforms in a 3-track line connection. Position that crosses line signals and line rotation in the center communication. Opti-system and travel lines in high setting. Okay, correlates the correlation track lines into 2-line provision. Center communication line system at all levels in position of track lines of face recognition. Okay, done by equation. So I'm setting up the center core lines of tractions into transit. Transit 1, I get position line centers, equal line communication, equal lines correlation settings into 4, in position of 3 in track line connections. Point lines of track and high center interference of 1, 2, 3, 4 in track location. Position lines of 3, 1, 2, 3. So we take the 1 centers, 2 tracks, 3 provisions, and 4 settings. Allocate position lines of transit in a 2-track line provision. Center core lines of track and position lines of pi. Sets correlation center and center communication. Sets lines of energetic dome screens and set applications. Operate the signal lines on high center. Sets location system of face recognition. All right, so face recognition timelines and screens. Directs modifications of files, walking line, ground lines, high center interference. Sets position lines in all communication setting in all line rotation centers at timestamps in line communication setting into its program a box location of center of communication. Okay, that my equation. So there's a lot of formulas on the equation line screen. Now you really have to understand the coloration of the pathogen and really understand how the center correlation setting comes into timeline screens, set location lines of your floaters. Floater communications are in the eyes. It's that position of its calculation. All right. So all modification lines of screens, lacing line communications, 2 lines of track, calculation line interference, 69 position line centers, sets position of the sun equals lines of communication of the moon, track calculation lines, / line communications back to center. Sets communication of center lines and center lines communication system in track locations. Setting track lines at highest center interference in position 2-9, sets equivocation system, and 0-1 in position of dot line communication into 0.1's attraction. Leap year, that by equation. Lacing lines are correlation settings attractions, guys, all through modification of formula. Directing lines all communication to your setting, yes, it's getting very hot. So what's happening? The connection to your eye receptor lines, your data highway line position, your consciousness of your awareness is changing communication settings, all calculation to your primals. The premium line rotation center is the ocular location setting division. The center core is the system locations, how you see through perception, right? Really understand the pixelation graph calculations. So your eye calculation line screens comes a line centers of 0s and 1s in traction. Inside position. All through calculation. Eye center line communication to its data highway. Okay. So center core position line centers is this block line circuitry streamlines, 4 track lines setting high interference of film strips over a pod. Position lines at center. Okay, correlation setting in position line in position to solar plex location. Sets correlation tracks into eye division at track line connections. All right. Circulation rotation center. All right. So we correlate the traction, upline swing, upline cross line rotation surface. Puts all key position time centers. Now, in that line system, in track location system, comes in all lines of communication, all through center calculation. Okay. So upswing the disc. It was this way, now it's up this way, right? So it's facing up, it's not facing down, right? So it's all about changing the galaxy wind line cycles and the travel position of its operation location system, how your eyes move back and forth. So we get a provision line screen into security lines of panels. We're changing the coloration of screen lines, adaptation, so you can see the direct and redirect positions of panel communication. Directing line division line crosses line calculations into your Merkabah tesseract and your tetrahedron location of face recognition. Correlations of tracks, platforms of 1 in position of 2, 3, and 4 tractions of waves. Cross line centers line 1, 2 in position line centers and high center interference in position. Inlines energetic dome in line rotation setting in all track locations of face recognition. That my equation. All right, so laser communication screens, your Skynet grid lines, high center interference, position of program lines, and point lines of track is now in center communications. Point lines of division, 1 data stream, position line calculation, another data stream, information panel, and 3 track line connection settings into their communication center. Position of point lines of tracks and data line position of files, set location of 0-1, sets communication lines high center interference, and position of 0.1's attraction. Okay, so that's done. Securing the line centers all levels of coloration pathogens. Correlate the track lines and high vision line centers, how you come into visionary cortex lines, placebo cortex screen set locations. Directing modification on 1 line cycle and 3 line communication. Sets lines communications, down cross location. Center correlation setting attraction. Sets lines and eye divisions applications. Cross line stream location. Platform communication at 2 lines of panels. Position lines of 1 track line connections, right? Sets cross line screen right through the core set location. Modification lines of cycles and platforms in a 4 track line provision. Okay, direct lines of setting, sun comes in, and moon line rotation surface and track line connections, all levels of operation line connections of face recognition. Number equation. So waiting on signal in line communication setting. So it comes into ground line communications. Now this is where we come into coloration line screens. Remember I was telling you about the truth position line centers of the narratives and the false narratives? Now we're going to coloration. Coloration lines of 1, coloration lines of 2, coloration lines of 3. 2-track line provision, let's change the color into purple, red, and position locations calculation. Coloration line screens, high center interference. Let's go into orange circles and 3-track line connections in position its operation. All right, so we change the correlation lines. Now we got to go into all position location of blue. Blue lines at center lines at 3-track line centers, high positions calculations. Okay. So coordinating position of travel lines, we take the all line communications into red lines into all position of 2 lines of lacing line communication. Now the modification line screen high interference, we set positional lines of red and track lines of red in line communication. Okay, lacing lines of correlation setting infinity cycles. Now we go in position lines of attractions. Let's go into the blue line cycles. Illuminate the graph calculation lines of point centers of tracks in illumination graph interference and lacing line communication. All right, so in that line interference, we have gold line screens. Now that provisions its cycles in line calculation setting, how it comes into lacing communication interference and track location. Okay. All right, so we go into infinity cycles and travel, point lines of tracks, in line position of measure and scale calculations. Now this lines its communications into its primal circuits, line setting and rotation surface and track location. Okay. All right. So this is when the ocular comes in. Now we wave the panel communications, come to block lines of data lines, box line rotation, box line rotation, box line rotation centers. Okay. So position lines of 4, 8, 12, right? 12 signals, lines of settings left, 12 signal locations of right, and 12 lines of center, 12 lines of grounds. Okay, so you got 12, 24. Position lines of set lines of high interference and position lines calculation stream interference. Okay, 24 to position lines of calculation line setting puts everything into 34. Position lines of 2. That's equals lines of 36 in travel and direct signal. Puts lines of 36 lines calculation lines of 3 lines of 1 in position of red and position of 3 lines of communication of red. Position lines of 6 over red, 6 line conditions over red. Position location of gold over 1, gold over 2 in track line condition settings. All logs, infinity line rotations, and center correlation setting to travel. Direct modification lines of blue cycles correlation setting to track lines. Provision cycles and a 2-track, 3-track line provision. Correlation setting to tracks. 1 line settings down cross. 2 line settings down cross. Set correlation cross line screens. 1 in position of 2-track locations. Okay, so unification lines, guys, is all levels how it comes into its flux capacitor and travel calculation of point circuits. Setting communication line center interference into bounds of communication, rounds of operation. Very powerful stuff in flux capacitor and a 4-track line connection. Okay, done my equation. All right. So 4 bar sequence lines of 12, position lines of 34, lines of 2, sets position of 2 lines of measure, puts correlation tracks of leap year in position of 29 settings in track locations, done by equation. Circuitry streams, data highways, skynets, and skygrid locations set up through flux capacitor communication stream. Modification screen settings, high adaptation, certification system, track calculation, colorations of pathogens in this application, done by equation. All right, so that's set up. 36 fields of operation screens, guys. Okay. The center communication setting of travel lines is the point lines of traction. How do you measure that in scales is understanding U through formula. The equation line screen interference. Is it a coincidence that we're at 29? No. Okay. 29, 29. Boom, bang. You guys are back in traction. See? Allocate position leap year lines of 29 position lines of center interference. Colorate the path of the communication lines, the eye receptor locations to its pineal gland, puts everything in operation surface, a track location. All right, so in that modification lines, we set up another formula line set location of skynets. Skynet has a data line interference. The eye set location setting has box line rotations into square roots in 3 set locations. Modification lines crosses line streams is set location. Optical inline rotation centers a box location. Right? Triangulation resets. Sun comes in, stops in signal, and center communication. All right. Correlate the tracks lines and the tentacle screen lines at 3 track locations. Modification lines of pi. Okay, 1/3 lines of operation. So we had 1/3 line. Okay, that's 1 equals lines of 1/3 in position of 2 graphs, 3 streams, 4 correlation settings, 6 lines into X, position of Y and Z. Then we go into the 8-track line conditions in a 4-track line provision and center correlation setting and positions calculation. Okay. Pixelation graph strain lines, guys. All right, so we go through pi lines at 8-track lines, provision lines at 6 location of core, atmosphere lines at 2 atom line rotations, 4-track lines of provision of the sun, and 1 equals lines of 1/3 in position of 8-track location of 2 lines is signify position locations into 9 lines is center communication setting and travel calculations. And there it is in track locations, number 9. Done by equation. That's it. Number 9 is there in center correlation setting. Done by equation. Very powerful when you understand how to put everything in location, energetic graph screen, location, visualize settings. It's all levels of how you correlate communication setting to its simulation. You're assimilating the simulation of core settings into number line communication and settings attractions, all through provision. Okay? All right. So getting into the core set location, all through flux capacitor, coloration line screens, into 36 lines of fields. That's all set up location setting the travels. All right, so we take the 36 line screen, gets into locations. Pi generation lines of 0 in position locations in 3 settings. Calculation line interference, sets position location centers. Very complicated stuff, guys, what I'm doing right now, so bear with me here. Track location of 3 line provisions, 3 coordinate setting Fibonacci lines of 2 track line conditions. Position lines of 4, position lines of 6, and travel communication. All right, directed modification lines has a core line track lines, earth line surface, and track location high setting. Triangulation line condition high centers, flip upside down. Sets lines of communication center, flip side up in position. Now, direct line modification comes in as square communication setting. Setting correlation lines, how to calculate modification line interference into home and track line conditions. Center communications, press 0, correlation. Done by equation. Back at home. Center core line centers has a 3-track line provision that sets lines of 3 line provision lines of 2 over pi. Correlates lines of 36 fields and track line conditions, 3 lines of measure, 3 track lines of center, and 3 line position. 3 lines of center in position line calculations of north, west, south, and east through diamond core set location. So we send in light communication, we travel lines to securities of panels. It sets lines of 12 line signals, line connections, 24 cycles, line calculation setting, 48 waves in communication, 72 track lines into 144 graph locations. 0 operation centers into 4 settings. Allocate position of travel lines into 6 settings. 0 correlation setting lines of 8 settings. 8 lines of 9, 9 lines of 10, 1 over 5th, position over box, triangulation of reset location setting of travel. Done by equation. Okay. Complicated stuff, isn't it? All right. So is everybody having fun? So it's just showing you exactly how you go through pi generation screen lines, the calculation of the sun line through all communication late year of February communication of 9 settings. 29 communications set up now. Manifestation of all core line calculation setting unification setting space. But you have to go location lines of 8-track and position lines centered space and 8-track location of all position lines of grounds. Center correlation lines of high center interference. Why do you think there's 8-track location setting to diamond core? Center correlation track lines and high positioners calculations, modification cycles, and set location. Done by equation. Okay. All right. So like I said, it's going to get more complicated now, right? Okay. So it's all justifications in your unification line screens to really understand how to really center that communication to its process and all set location, your settings of time. So position lines, record the calculation of formulas. Okay. Now we're going to go into that review. Okay, because Friday is the test. So basically, getting into the frequency line screen is really understanding how to get in position of truth. Let's go line communication of false. Okay, sets location line centers, interference, 3-track line connection settings, in position to its locations. I'm going to show you how this works in all tractions so you understand more modification. All right, it's got 3-track lines, position equal line calculation setting, arrow indicated up, arrow indicated down, arrow indicated across line, and screen lines of 2-track line connections, set a position of 2 provisions of cycles. Okay, so we have correlations and tractions, 2 lines of rotation. Very complicated stuff. All right, remember about truth and false narrow locations? Setting track communication coloration line set at high interference is false. Sets position of truth, right? That's set location line centers. Calculation high interference. Form is communication line centers and calculation settings into false, and position of truth and position of false. All right. All right. Direct lines calculation line interference of truth, truth, truth. Sets position all levels into false, and position line is all calculation of false. 3 truths, 3 false. Okay. So it's really understanding the binary line, the cortex and stream locations to your binaries. To understand the allocated position of time sequence. So what I want you guys to do is get into coloration all levels into your pathogens to understand what you're doing through your truth narratives and your false narratives locations when you're picking up frequencies. So you pick up the frequencies of its truth, you pick up the frequency location that's false, you pick up the frequency location to its alteration of state of the mind, where it is in consciousness of its source and center of communication of its yin-yang of process calculation. Okay? Because it's always going to be a track line calculation lines of a 6 and an unaligned rotation center. Because you're always working with a continuous flow of line rotation surface and track location. All 3 provision. Okay? All right, so that's what the connections of the line center location test is all about. I just want you guys to understand the frequencies. Every time you pick something up and you put it down, pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down, right? It's changing the coloration through line connections of truth into false, right? So we already know what the calculation high interference gets you guys out of the truth of the false is get you guys into teleportation and formation. Then we can go on to the next line signal and modification, right? All right, so as we set the formula equation lines, the coloration line screen sets lines of your perception. That changes everything through coloration. You're setting through your seat locations. So line connect high interference sets position line centers and 1-track line connections. Directing lines of communications. Your eyes have to go this way, and this way, and this way, and this way. This way, and this way, and this way. And set locations. All those are track locations. What is it positional of? Flowers of recognition. Okay, so your eye central line centers has to go in all point centers, right? Point centers of north, east, west, and south. North, east, west, and south. Okay. Now, eye center line communication has a split line centers and set location. Okay, eye center line communications. Point lines of tracks, data line streams, 2-track location. Sets lines at 3-line provision. Sets communication line cross location. Center communication line interference position location. Direct lines at center communication setting, in position operation line calculation setting interference, into application north line communication. Okay, that's what you're doing through your ISET locations. All right, so once you get into soul identification, the actual line connection settings location, your SIM will travel through the point centers into applications into the light of trackification. Right? So when it tracks the location line center, it comes into its platform and center calculation. Okay. Once it gets in its platforms, it's all in a communication process. Then you understand traveling through the light of point lines of tractions in all communication with settings, all levels of operation set locations to a center of its communication. So the eye center line communication sets of light communications. Now direct lines, the XT1000s come in. Okay, they platform line screen into the light. They travel in the light sequence code screen location settings to your connections of your light and your dark web communication. Setting that line center to your Skynets and SkyGrid communications. So every time you set position of data line stream, once it understands the allocated position of time sequence of zeros, numbers, and letters and shapes, it correlates its calculation of data that sets position where the XT1000s land in position of its platform set location inside the light. So when it lands on the light and travel communication of point systems, you can communicate with its setting in your eye receptor location. Directing modification line screens, guys, it's all levels, creating the XT1000s of platforms, all right, so they can get in communication line screen locations. The optical line stream interference into your prime modes and line calculation setting to your optimum changes ground lines and highest interference of your data highways in box location of circuits and set position of box brains in triangulation line rotation as center of communication. Okay, correlate the data files all through light signal. Okay, very powerful stuff in this application. Okay, traveling through light through the eye receptor. That's what you see. Okay, circulation, rotation, all line settings. Platitude lines of 1 in position of 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. What do you have? A Stargate. You have a Stargate. Now, understanding the Stargate, then you understand the panels, then you understand the mapping sequence, and then you understand the correlations, and then you understand the provision line cycles, where it comes into your line cycles, high calculation to your lights, to see the location of your perception. So when you get into that line connections, you blow it up. You see it from a high calculation, high positional point center. North is always a reference in all position locations. North is always left. North is always right. North is always south. North is always east. North is always west. So you're always in that direct signal. North, 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 right? So the XT knows exactly what you're doing in track lines when you're looking in direct signal location system and its perimeters. The security panel communication line centers adds position lines of track lines into your right and your left line cycles. It correlates setting attractions in your perceptions of light codes and dark code lines, screen lines, and highest interference into your SkyNet and skyline settings of your sky grids and set locations to your eye receptor line rotations into your platforms of communication, all through center calculations. Okay? So, yeah, it is. It's very beautiful, Heather, when you get that line communications. But I just want to show you what you guys are going through correlation setting as you go through 7 ways of volunteers, 7 rotation centers, 7 light command centers, 7 light rotation platforms, 7 communication light interference, 7 computer operation line screens, 7 adaptation center line communication, 7 waves of center communication, 7 correlation lines of correlations of light, 7 communication lines of high calculation setting and position of satellites, all through set locations in your data highways, in your Omni highway communications of your eye receptor lines of your Oracle division. Position lines of ocular line communication travels, direct lines of signal lines communications, so that the XT1000 lands on the platforms in position attractions. Sending correlation lines of track locations through your eye line connection settings. Okay, this relays the program locations to create the line setting line connection eye systems to all levels in position that comes in all calculation line screen interference into a Stargate. It opens up a Stargate inside the eye center. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Okay? So the team is coming into 7 wave lines, and they understand it through line connection eye sitting. And this is what it looks to do tractions. Opens up signals, and set location. All levels of modification lines, more Stargates, and track lines, and high center position into its operation system. Okay, all through correlation, right? 7 waves of volunteers. Okay, 7 Stargates or rotation centers in seconds per line. That correlates to square roots and travel line communication setting. So the seconds on the line communication line system is 7 million seconds. 7 million seconds per line, per square root. 7 million seconds, guys. Okay? So the eye receptor line screen and direct line signals, modification line screen interference, is going to allocate position of time center. It's going to put your position of its program into center communication to your Stargates, star maps, star signals, and line calculating setting to the geometry and line communication that you created in line connection to your settings through your eye receptor location, your spectrum lights. Sets lines of point line track location setting and 7 through provision. All through calculation. Okay? That's all looking through an eye. Okay? 7,000 frames. 7,000 frames per second. That's the team's going to be on. 7,000 frames per second. And that's in one set location of one light signature in a direct panel. Okay. So it correlates the minutes and it tracks lines into tracking device lines, screens into transistors. Now the rotation surface and the track to its communication lines, optimum inline screen interference into your primal cords. This discords your line communication setting and travel. This allocates position location in your centers to your eye receptors of your data line interference so you don't get confused of what you're seeing through direct lines of light and travel communication and spectral communication light set locations. And all of the center calculation, all through the eye receptor. Okay? Eye receptor location, all through lights. So those 7,000 frames, now the correlation track lines and spacing line is going to be at 3,000 frames per second. Directing lines modification line screen is all about understanding the pixelation graph lines. Now this comes into lacing lines of box locations, right? Lacing line, everybody knows what that is, right? Crossing line screens, high set locations, right? So it's all about understanding what it is in directions because the XT1000s come in and travel communication, so point centers. Okay? So they scan line provision in 3 cycles and all set location. So in that line rotation interference, if you understand the box location, it comes out of the equation and sets the data highways and high calculation streams. Modificates lines in the film strip line centers of 3 track line conditions. You know why it's in the 3 track line conditions? In and out in audio. Track lines in position, outlines subtractions, and outlines of audio communication center and travel communication. So in that direct line condition, you take the lacing lines of communication, 45-degree angles of pixelation graphs and correlation setting attractions, cross line signals and box line rotation surface, and position location near center. Very complicated stuff, all through a TV receptor. Now, the correlate the ground lines, center communication setting that puts all levels of communication center. Direct modification lines at high center interference of flywheel and direction affinity, rotation surface, and track location. Modification lines at energetic dome screens. Sets position lines into your location grids. This is location grid in line connection energetic dome. Sets communication lines, the lacing line communication line center in position to your primal circuits and set location. Done by equation, know exactly what's going on through travel lines when you're looking directly at light and communication surface and track location. Okay? Flower recognition. See the flower? There's a flower right there. See it? Flower recognition. Okay? Very powerful stuff. All right. So once you understand that position of travel lines, the center core is setting to your eye lines opens up more lines of data. The process of correlation setting is really understand the light signals, understand the correlation tracks, direct location system of your truth and false narratives, the trackification and coloration of pathogens in all track line conditions. Okay? I know, eh? It's exciting. That's what it is, Trinity. That's what it is. Through energetic graph calculation screen locations. All through leap year of 29. How to set these things up. All right. Especially when you come into Stargate locations. All right. So the team's going to be coming into 7 of everything, but you're going to be dealing with 7,000 line seconds per frame. 7,000 line seconds per frame. That's a lot. Okay. Now, in that line seconds, that turns into line communication of a minute through hour communication. But position of track lines, you focus on that. Has nothing to do with anybody else because you're going through different lines of travel, but you're all in this center line communication of 7 each. You're just seeing different levels of perception of light. And you have to understand the frames by frames by frames to understand the seconds, minutes, and its hour of track location of what's happening with your eye lines when it's scanning back and forth. Okay? 7 times faster of everything. All right. 3,000 lines of species, 7,000 lines of team. All right, so the cerebral cortex lines set position your stargates, sets line communication 12 graph calculation stream interference, tracks communication line screens and high set or in position location near A track location your settings into Merkaba. Tesseract tetrahedron line calculation setting in line communication. All right. So it's very powerful when you understand location your central line communication, your flux capacitor, location of box centers. All through coloration and coloration lines, screen interference location in your system, and pathogens. Understanding the core setting and track lines into tether in set positions all levels. This scales the balance location in your system, your eye receptor line conditions. So you guys understand what floaters are. What does that mean in track location system when you're looking at the sun? There's floaters in your eye. What does that mean? You have to understand what that is. It's all lacing line communication. So once you get into modification, then you understand the lines, how it comes into the lacing line communication. Track to its communication lines has high position of travels, two-track location. Okay, offline communication. Okay, so stays an online, offline, online, offline. Now, this is position of tether, this is position of quantum interference. So this is okay. Just don't get confused with what you're doing through perception of our line screen. Okay, you don't want to allocate position your A tracks or anything to your B line screens or anything to your C position of comp2 line interference or your division location and setting location, your delta headings. Standing track lines at 4-point track line conditions settings in all levels in clock location system in your system. Okay, so it's knowing exactly where you're going through light track lines and your position line centers into your travels. Okay, so in position, the XT1000 comes in traction, scans line communication, see if there's a platform. If there's a platform, it will stay there and it'll communicate with you in line connection. But if there's not a platform line calculation setting, what happens, the other XT1000 comes in a line track location system, puts you in a line communication line centers in position of lacing line calculation. So there's a lot of communication lines of the I line center that's going into platform. Platform communication center, platform communication line center, platform communication lines are all position of focus in position at all levels of crop circle. Crop circle. Oh, now you understand why there's center line communication crop circles and ground line communication settings and Mother Earth and track locations. Hoo-ah! See what I mean? You see, understand the interline calculation setting, the central communication surface, how it comes into location setting, all levels when you kind of code weaving, co-activation, teleportation, screen interference, pi direction, time, center locations, clock locations, anagram interference, position locations, optical line screen interference, job position of point centers, line connection settings, OMI highway communication, data highway, multi-layers, communication, mega unit position link track location, line centers, data communication, stream interference, and position process. All through point track line connections of data and highways and set location. Okay? What is that? What is it? It's an eye. That's the inner eye. Everything happens in the eyes. Okay? Very powerful. All right, so the team's coming in that track line. So you have to really understand how to process that line communication setting, all track communication, your system, and track calculation settings, and all line center interference and position traction. Okay? So your ID vision comes in at data op, positions your position line centers and travel. Point lines of tracks into mapping sequence. Now this correlates and sending track lines into pi. This direction setting. So you have 3 track line provision, a pi communication. What did you do from here and set location to 2 track line connections? What did you do from here going back in track line connections to setting? What did you do from here going forward in communication system to 2 track line connections? What did you do going here in a 3 track line provision and center calculations? Okay, what did you do here from going forward and back in set location? Through transistors and resistors, through pi and binary and set connections. Okay, very powerful stuff. So when you get in that correlation setting attractions, you set up platforms. Platform, 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 platform. The arrows become platforms in track location, high settings through iReceptor. Setting communication lines, XT1000 comes in, track location, sees the platform, lands there at track location. So what it does, it opens up a crop circle line screen lines, your light screen line interference of data highways, expands your line screens into film projector, and 3 lines or 4 lines or 6 lines of communication setting and travel position locations of operation. It expands your data highway of film projector. Okay, so it's very important to know exactly what you're seeing through lights. Okay, through eye central line connecting your settings in position calculation. Okay. Now, getting a correlation lines of track lines, we get into the cranial. That's next in setting. Very powerful stuff. But you got to get in provision lines of Stargate communication of 7, all 3 platforms, right? So to get in that line communication, you have to slow down your space because they're going very, very fast. And what happens, the light graph screen basically comes in as still. And it comes in frame, You can see the ISF locations. There's a light graph screen. There's the XT coming in. There's a platform, lands in position, adds another data highway to your central calculation line, to your hippocampus, opens up the placebo cortex line, cosmic effect the set location line centers. Congratulations, you've entered high communication lines, of dimensional lines of doors to go through a higher calculation. All through modification, all through light, right? So the soul basically travels through all lines of communication, your data highways. So there's a reason why you have correlation settings attractions. Now this measures the correlation setting in positionless calculations. Everything happens in the eyes. Eyes are the windows of the soul. You guys are coming into that ramifications, verification, and confirmation now. And that's what happens to the eye center line communication setting through all levels and track line communication settings in position locations to the center eye of communication. Okay? All right, so it's very important to get those platforms. Okay? So the connection lines of zeros and ones tracks this communication line system. Now, understanding the light bulbs. So you got platform 1 and platform 2. Okay? Light on, light off. Light on, light off in set location, right? So that's 1, position of 2, and position of 3, and 4 track lines of graph calculations of streams. 4 track line connections. Now you can add the 2 track lines and add 1 provision of 1 platform into expansion of all communication. 1 setting. So you get many XT1000s coming in track lines and platforms. 1, 2, 3, 4 in position, landing on the graph lines of the light graph calculation string lanes of data highways in set location. Very powerful stuff. Okay? So now you're understanding more levels of you when you come into your settings of travel. Understanding the OMNI highways, understanding the data process, understanding why they have line communications. So once you get into that, then you understand the zeros and the ones in track location, what it is through its highway. It's creating traffic. It's creating a network setting. It's very powerful when you understand the process of expansion and set location, your system, and longitude and latitude of streaming width and line communication setting process. And then more XT1000s come in. And then more XT1000s come in, right? Platitude, 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 platitude. All in position. All in position. Right? So instead of working with 7,000 line seconds, you're working with 7 billion line seconds, all through data platforms. Data ports in your central system of iSet location. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Okay? All right, we're done. Any more, you guys will get colossal confusion. But I just want to show you how powerful it is of what you guys are coming into to really understand the platforms of communication. It's all about you processing you into higher levels of abstraction, higher levels of division, higher levels of multiple line centers, higher levels of pi, higher levels of dimension, universes, galaxies, planets. But you got to create those platforms through light. So your soul can identify everything in correlation attractions through your star gates. Okay? Data highways, OMNI highways and track locations through light, through eye vision. Okay? Oracle division line connections, ocular line connection, high center interference, and position to its location. Okay? Yes, it's huge, Trinity. This is the eyes of the windows of the soul. Now you're going to understand what that is when you're seeing through light track line connections of its operation system. Okay? See you guys in 5. Doo-doo.